It started with a phone call to the police. Cynthia Reynolds, the HOA president, claimed my pregnant wife, Sarah, was a public nuisance because of her thunderous footsteps. Her excuse? She was preserving the neighborhood's peace. The real blow came when the cops sided with Sarah, leaving Cynthia's ego in tatters. That morning, the battle lines were drawn, but the war had been brewing since the day we met her. I first saw Cynthia wielding a laser-guided tape measure, zeroed in on a single blade of grass in our yard, a quarter-inch too tall by her meticulous standards. Sarah, 7 months pregnant and radiating calm, thought it was a quirky story for our unborn son. I wasn't so naive. I'd crossed paths with people like Cynthia, petty autocrats who rule subdivisions like fiefdoms. She wasn't eccentric, she was a control freak, and our lawn was her first target. I stepped out of the garage, hands smeared with grease from my 1965 Mustang restoration, my refuge from stress. Sarah had her meditation. I had my tools. Need something? I asked, my voice edged with irritation. Cynthia didn't blink, her eyes flicking to the oil stain on my shirt like it was a crime. Clad in crisp linen and a polo with the Cedar Hollow HOA crest, a pompous owl that looked more like a spooked sparrow, she announced herself. I'm Cynthia Reynolds, president of the Cedar Hollow Homeowners Association, she said, as if it conferred divine authority. I'm Mike, I replied, keeping my last name to myself. You're on my property. Her lips pursed into a tight line. Your lawn violates Bylaw 14A, subsection 2. Grass must not exceed 3 inches. This blade is 3.25 inches. Fix it within 24 hours, or face a fine. I nearly laughed, but the cold spark in her eyes stopped me. This was her battlefield. Across the street, her husband, Edward, lounged against their polished silver SUV, smirking in a matching polo. He tossed me a mock wave, relishing the drama. My temper, a beast I've spent years taming, stirred. People like Cynthia know exactly how to provoke. Sarah emerged, cradling a glass of lemonade, her smile warm and inviting. Hi, I'm Sarah, she said. Cynthia barely glanced at her, her gaze lingering on Sarah's pregnant belly with disdain. Your husband was just informed of a violation, she said, her tone dripping with superiority. Stress isn't healthy for the baby. The threat was thinly veiled, and Sarah's smile faltered. That was the line. The grass, the laser, the smug husband, they were distractions. Threatening my wife and unborn son was the spark. I stepped closer, fists clenched, voice low. Get off my lawn, and don't ever speak to my wife again. Understood. Cynthia's eyes flashed with shock, then fury. Edward straightened, his smirk fading. You'll pay for this, she hissed, retreating with icy precision. I knew she wasn't bluffing. The war for Cedar Hollow had begun. We moved to Cedar Hollow for tranquility, not conflict. After years in a dingy city apartment that smelled of regret and burnt toast, Sarah and I craved a quiet place to raise our son. I ran a cybersecurity firm from home, and Sarah was a project manager, a genius with timelines and budgets. When we learned she was pregnant, the city became stifling. Cedar Hollow, with its shaded streets and promises of community picnics, seemed like paradise. Our modest colonial needed work, but its sprawling yard and 2-car garage called to us. We signed the HOA papers without hesitation, envisioning a serene suburban life. The first month was perfect. We painted the nursery a gentle green dawn of dreams for our son, Ethan. I tore out old linoleum, installing hardwood while Sarah directed from a lawn chair, sipping herbal tea. We met neighbors, the Sweet Morgans, who gifted us a cherry pie, the Thompsons, with their noisy kids and retriever, and Gus, the eccentric retiree 2 doors down. Gus's yard was a wildflower riot, his mailbox a neon swirl, and his plastic flamingos formed daily tributes to chaos. Welcome to the gauntlet, he said, grinning over our fence. You've met Queen Cynthia, I take iteran of bylaws, scourge of serenity. I chuckled, dismissing it as hyperbole. I should have heeded his warning. Trouble started early. We built a small ramp for Sarah, whose balance was unsteady in her 3rd trimester. Days later, a gold-embossed HOA letter arrived, declaring the ramp an unauthorized alteration that clashed with the neighborhood's aesthetic unity. Sarah, ever pragmatic, submitted approval forms, citing medical need. The rejection came swiftly, visual discord. I was furious. She's pregnant. What's next to trapeze? Sarah's hand on my arm calmed me. We choose our fights, Mike. We dismantled the ramp, thinking we were keeping the peace. We were wrong. To predators like Cynthia, capitulation is weakness. The harassment intensified. Fines piled up, $50 for overgrown grass, $80 for a porch light too bright. Sarah's stress soared, her doctor urging calm she couldn't summon. Our home felt like a prison. Then came sabotage sprinklers flooding our porch at 3 a.m., ruining our floors, baby gifts vanishing from our doorstep. I installed cameras, my IT instincts in overdrive, backing footage to a cloud server. When a ceramic gnome appeared in Cynthia's yard, blocking my lens, I knew it was deliberate. The tipping point came on a scorching Monday. Sarah, battling swollen ankles and back pain, shuffled to the mailbox. As she paused, Cynthia's industrial sprinkler roared, a high-pressure blast knocking her down. She fell hard, clutching her belly, screaming, "Mike, the baby!" I saw it from the window, my heart stopping. I raced to her, finding her soaked and sobbing on the pavement. Across the street, Cynthia stood on her porch, remote in hand, her face alight with triumph. Edward grinned beside her. They'd ambushed my pregnant wife. I got Sarah inside, called her doctor, and rushed her to the hospital. Ethan was fine, but my rage crystallized into something sharp and cold. This was no longer about rules. It was personal. At home, I reviewed the footage, Cynthia triggering the sprinkler, Sarah falling, Edward watching. Sarah, her fear now fury, asked, "What's our move, Mike?" I grabbed a notebook. We built a case. Every fine, every attack documented. Sarah crafted a spreadsheet, a monument to our anger, while I upgraded our cameras to night vision models. Gus became our informant, whispering about Cynthia's calls to city officials' fake fire hazards, imaginary barking dogs. Each incident fueled our evidence. Then I hit pay dirt. Hacking the HOA's flimsy website, I slipped into their server through a weak plugin. I found financials, monthly 5-figure transfers to Evergreen Ventures LLC, a ghost company with a barebones website. State records revealed the owner, Edward Reynolds. My pulse raced. Cynthia and Edward were siphoning HOA dues through a shell company. It wasn't just harassment, it was fraud. They invented violations to extort fines, targeting anyone who might question them. Sarah and I were a threat, and the sprinkler was meant to break us. I could have called the cops, but I wanted their empire in ruins. I devised a trap, a fake RFP for a massive security contract, sent from a fictional tech tycoon to the HOA board. I knew Cynthia would push Evergreen Ventures to bid. When she called, her voice dripping with greed, I posed as the tycoon's proxy, luring them to our house. Sarah, on bed rest, monitored cameras from her recliner. I hid pinhole cameras in a clock, a vase, a bookshelf, every angle streaming to a secure server. At 7 p.m., Cynthia and Edward arrived, dressed like corporate vultures. I played a gruff foreman, dim lights, and a cap masking my face. They thought they were pitching a lucrative deal. I leaned in, voice low. "My boss noticed your company gets hefty HOA payments for upkeep. How do you pull that off when the money's funneled offshore?" Their faces paled. Cynthia snarled, "You're that tech guy. You've been snooping." Edward, in a panic, smashed a camera hidden in a vase, thinking he'd erased the evidence. 2 other cameras kept rolling, capturing their confession. The room crackled with danger. Cynthia dialed for code blue, backup, and Edward lunged at me. Sarah's voice thundered through the speakers. "Police are coming." They grabbed a decoy cassette I'd planted and fled, tires screeching. Days later, a city inspector, Edward's cousin, slapped us with a condemnation notice, claiming our renovations were unsafe. We had 72 hours to leave. Sarah wept, but I saw their desperation. They thought they'd won. The HOA meeting was their victory parade. Cynthia, in a crimson suit, planned to announce our eviction. But I had a trump card. Gus's nephew, a forensic accountant, uncovered their scheme. They'd bought up Cedar Hollow's empty lots, driving out homeowners to sell to a developer for millions. At the meeting, I projected their forged invoices, bank transfers, and their damning confession. The room exploded, neighbors shouting, filming, realizing years of torment were a scam. As Cynthia screamed threats, police stormed in, cuffs snapping. Her final wail was my symphony. 3 weeks later, Ethan was born. Our home was safe, the eviction voided. Cynthia and Edward faced prison, their mansion empty. The HOA was disbanded, replaced by a new group under Gus, who demanded a flamingo fund. Pushing Ethan's stroller past their for sale sign, I knew every sleepless night was worth it. We'd raised their kingdom.